Ganyu's original home had been very hard to get to, being hidden away from the world by the use of ancient Qilin seals that could only be accessed by said species. The first seal had been against the face of a mountain just north of Mount Hulao, having been covered by overgrowth of vegetation and being very faded by years of torment from the weather. However, Ganyu had found and accessed the hidden pathway as if it were common knowledge to her, the seal having opened to a long cave littered with overgrown plants that radiated an icy blue glow that matched Ganyu's hair color perfectly. It was unlike anything Keqing had ever witnessed, the cave having led them to a forest that mimicked the same blue coloration. It revealed a path that led them deeper into the land, the second seal having been the next obstacle to pass. Once again, Ganyu had passed the ancient lock as if it were nothing, and had allowed them to proceed into a new place that seemed alien. There were trees that were contorted and twisted with healthy green leaves, bushes that were littered with berries that grew the same blue light, and straight ahead was a ring of mountains with one entrance at the front. Thin hair-like strands hung from the outer faces of the peaks, glowing the same cold light as the vegetation in the first cave, and upon getting closer, the long branches that grew from the outer faces adorned large pods that resembled canopies. They were decrepit at this point, but it was in no doubt a beautiful sight. The views before Ganyu's eyes starting to stir up memories that had long been forgotten. "It's all coming back to me," she said in wonder, raising her arm to the sky and pointing out towards something. "That pot up there, that was mine. My mother would let me sleep with her in it every night, seeing I commonly had bad dreams. She'd hum some lullaby to help me sleep, and before I knew it, it was morning again." Keqing smiled at her beloved's precious memory, happy that Ganyu was starting to recollect a time where she was free and innocent without a care in the world. Ganyu was in a trance of remembrance unlike any other, continuing to speak of a past that she'd buried thousands of years ago. "Those berries, they're called firefly berries because of how easy they are to mistake for one," she continued, walking over and picking one from the bush. "They were my favorite thing to eat because they taste sweet." She plopped the luminescent fruit into her mouth and immediately smiled upon tasting her favorite childhood snack. She started to remember when she'd sneak off during sleeping hours to savor her taste buds with them, up until she got caught by her mother. It was a silly memory that followed up with when she and the other young Qilin would go off to pick them and bring them back to the main village. From there, the adults would make a jelly out of them and serve it on vasca leaves that grew from the trees of life. Ganyu's favorite dish and guilty pleasure as a child, seeing eating too much could cause obesity. Something she had to fix by going on grueling hikes from the bottom base of Mount Hulao all the way to the very top peak. A tread that took all day and had Ganyu's body back into shape after 5 times. She turned to Keqing and stated something that she felt was only fitting as her lover. "Do you want to try one, my love?" Keqing jumped, feeling as if eating a food that was sacred to the Qilin was taboo. Are you sure it's okay?" she answered. "I wouldn't want to offend any of your kind by doing so." Ganyu giggled lightly, finding her beloved's reasoning fair, but she also knew it wasn't anything forbidden. "You won't offend any of my kind. Don't forget, you're my beloved, therefore you're family." Keqing couldn't argue with that. She was Ganyu's most trusted and loved companion, so that made her one of her own kind, even if she wasn't actually a Qilin. However, she trusted Ganyu, so she felt safe to accept the offer. "Alright, I trust you." Keqing agreed, to which Ganyu followed by picking one of the small fruits from the bush and handing it to her lover. Keqing accepted the offering and stuck the tree into her mouth. Once she bit down and the fruit's inner juices adorned her taste buds, she immediately fell in love with the flavor. Upon splitting open the snack, a cool essence overrode her senses, the sensation being similar to a cool feeling that a mint leaf causes upon chewing it. Following the cold burst, a sweetness graced her entire oral cavity, causing her to jolt at the taste and continuing to chew the delicious Qilin delicacy. Once she'd grinded the berry to a paste, she gulped it down and turned to Ganyu with a giddy smile. "That was quite the experience," she commented, causing Ganyu to giggle. "Delicious, isn't it?" Ganyu replied. "Very. Thank you for allowing me to eat something precious to your kind." "No need to thank me. Whatever is part of my Adeptus heritage is now a part of you, my love." Keqing blushed at the comment, walking up to Ganyu and pecking her lightly on the cheek. Ganyu giggled at the sentiment, returning back to the task at hand. All right. That's enough messing around for now. Let's get back to what we came here for." Keqing nodded, to which Ganyu answered by turning back to the main path and leading Keqing further towards the mountain entrance. Upon passing the opening to the inner center of the rounded mountains, a view of melancholy and dread came into view. Homes, skeletons, remnants of what was once a bustling utopia of gracious and calm beasts in shambles. A sight that immediately attacked Ganyu's heart and caused the painful memories of her last day there to replay. Tears immediately filled her eyes upon noticing one specific skeleton that she knew the identity of, the one that had kept her and her mother safe from assured death. Her father. The day of the attacks started to play out before her eyes, causing her to cry mildly. Keqing immediately comforted her beloved, remembering the night that Ganyu had told the very event that had caused the very remnants before her eyes. She put her left hand on Ganyu's right shoulder and rubbed it lightly in love and assurance that she was there to mourn with her. Ganyu accepted the sentiment, allowing her emotions to escape her in relief. This was something she had needed to confront for centuries, and now she finally had. While it hurt like hell, it felt so good to cry out the trauma of her past. Finally, she could leave the past behind and not worry about having those nightmares anymore. After a good amount of time, Ganyu finally wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. I can finally sleep peacefully without guilt, she said with relief. Thank you, Father, for keeping Mom and I safe that day. It's been hard, but I finally found happiness in love and friendship with my beloved Keqing after centuries of pain and loss. She turned to Keqing with a smile and addressed the next step of their reason for coming here. Come on, the next thing I need to retrieve isn't far. Keqing nodded in understanding, starting forward with her beloved. However, after taking a few steps, something made them stop dead in their tracks. That essence, it can't be. A voice spoke from among the ruins, the voice being mature and motherly. Ganyu gasped at the voice, knowing immediately who had spoken. There's no way. That possibly can't be. From out of the ruins, a lady with long icy blue hair and a pair of long horns stepped out into the light, every aspect of her mirroring Ganyu perfectly. She was tall, had a mild amount of wrinkles around her eyes, and used a cane to walk. There was no doubt who she was, and it became all the more apparent upon her eyes beginning to water with tears. My daughter! My little Ganyu! She spoke, causing Ganyu to immediately begin to cry again, rushing forward and embracing her mother with love and emotion unlike any other. Ganyu bawled like a baby, having never expected to see her mother ever again in her life. But here she was, alive and well. The elderly Qilin just embraced her child with unadulterated love and comfort, completely bewildered that her only child had returned there. "Shh, it's okay, sweetheart," she comforted emotionally. "Mommy's here. Mommy's here. Always." Ganyu just continued to cry, embracing a reunion she had longed for so long. She was in her mother's arms again, warm and safe after over 3,000 years. Keqing just let the two be, just as amazed by this sudden unexpected encounter as Ganyu. She thought that all of the Qilin were dead except for her beloved, but now it was possible that more lived with this discovery. The two embraced one another for a long time, up until they finally released their hold on one another and looked into each other's eyes. Mother and daughter were together again, and it was all because of fate. "Look at you," Ganyu's mother stated. "You grew into such a beautiful lady after all these years." "No doubt you have your mother's looks." Ganyu giggled at the compliment, just allowing her mother to talk to her. I can't believe you're here, Mom. I've missed you so much." "And I have missed you too, sweetheart. I never thought this day would come. But you have made it. You have made it back to your home." Ganyu wiped her eyes again, jumping at the sudden realization that she had yet to introduce her beloved. Oh, Mom, let me introduce you to someone very special to me," she stated sheepishly. "This is my partner and beloved, Keqing." The elder eyed Keqing with judgmental eyes. After all, she was a human, the very species that had nearly eradicated the entire Qilin race. Ganyu grew worried at her mother's expression and demeanor, scared that she might attack. However, she didn't pounce or say anything negative, only smiled. "Greetings, dear," she greeted. "My name is Rizhora. I'm Ganyu's mother." Ganyu was bewildered, but she was also relieved that her mother had accepted Keqing with open arms. "I do apologize if I scared you for a second. I was simply reading your soul and saw that you are someone with a pure heart. Therefore, I have no reason to judge you harshly." "Thank you?" Keqing replied. It's a pleasure to meet you, Rizhora." Rizhora just smiled and bowed in acceptance, following with something that was expected. "You must have so many questions, sweetie, so allow me to answer them over some tea," Rizhora explained. "Please, come with me. I just brewed a pot." Ganyu and Keqing nodded and started to follow Rizhora to wherever she'd taken up residency after that tragic day thousands of years ago. The walk to Rizhora's residence had taken no more than 5 minutes, the abode being nothing more than a small hut occupied by a handmade bed, teapot, and some spare clothes. It was sad to see someone so accepting and caring living so poorly, but it was clear she'd known how to outlast the years, given that she was still alive and kicking. Rizhora had poured Keqing and Ganyu a cup of some kind of tea neither of them were familiar with. Seeing, as a child, Ganyu hadn't drunk tea as much as she does now. Drinking tea was more of an adult habit than a child's, so both of the lovers had no idea what they were in for. Their server joined them on the wooden floor, pouring herself her own cup carefully. She then sat the pot in the middle of the circle they'd formed, taking a subtle sip before starting her explanation on how she was somehow still alive. I suppose I should start from the beginning. The day I had to make the hardest decision that no mother should have to make. Some thugs somehow got through the seals and attacked us with the sole intent of murder. We were drastically unprepared, believing that we were safe from outsiders. But I suppose fate had different plans. We shifted into our beastly forms and took the offensive, but were surprisingly subdued quickly by our foes' tactics. Your father, Vatoris, stood his ground to protect us, but eventually, his body succumbed to the blows. Out of pure instinct, I knew what I had to do, even if it broke my heart. I turned to you and told you to run and not stop until you were safe. It hurts so much to watch my only child leave, but I knew you'd die if I didn't make that decision. As for what happened after, I transformed and attacked without any hesitation. I took some hits and suffered some wounds, but I aimed for their heads and tore them off as fast as possible. I was hoping to force them to retreat out of fear, and it worked. They left and never came back again, but the damage had already been done. I attempted to heal your father back to health, but the wounds had been too much. I grieved majorly, having to tend to my own battle scars, which were mild in comparison. After I was healthy enough, I headed out to find you, but came up empty after centuries of searching endlessly. I never wanted to give up, but age began to take its toll on my body. I slowly lost my ability to walk normally, and if I stayed out too long searching, I'd become ill. I'm so sorry, Ganyu, but I had no choice but to stop for the sake of my own safety. I just hope you can forgive me. Ganyu shook her head, putting a hand on her mother's shoulder. Mother, you don't need to be sorry for anything. You saved my life and gave me a longer life to live. I've met so many good people, experienced so many amazing things, and have found happiness because of your decision that day. Please, quit blaming yourself. I'm here now, safe and happy to be with you again. I love you, and always will, and will never blame you for age making it impossible for you to have continued to search for me. The fact you still wanted to look for me, despite your health, is enough for me to know that you've always cared and only did what you thought was best for me. Rajora wiped her eyes of her tears and met her daughter's gaze. A wave of relief suddenly came over her at her child's confirmation that she didn't blame her for anything. A relief she'd been searching for millennia. Thank you, sweetheart, she said with clear assurance, picking up and taking another sip from her teacup. You do not know how much this means to me. I finally have clarity and can sleep peacefully at night. However, there lies the greatest curiosity in my mind. How did you find your way back here? You were much too young to know how to access the seals. So how did you break them without teachings from the elders? Reality came back to Ganyu instantly, remembering why she had come here in the first place. Well, I recently had an epiphany, and in it, I learned how to do so. However, my reason for coming back wasn't to confront my greatest demons, but to obtain something that can help me better my Qilin abilities. Rajora made an expression that clearly showed that she knew exactly what her daughter was talking about. taking another sip and setting her cup off to the side. I see, and I understand. However, I must know what you'd need something like that for. What you seek is a very sacred treasure and must only be used for certain reasons. Not to mention, while you are an adult now, do you believe you are ready for such a thing? The simple answer is that I must be ready, Mother. This concerns the entire world, and unless our enemy is stopped, all of us will perish. She followed up by explaining the entirety of what had happened since the night of Liyue Harbor's destruction, making sure to include every critical detail to convince her mother that she must let her do what she'd come here to do. At the end of it, Rajora was shaken, shocked that such things had become her daughter's reality. It hurt her heart, and that was enough to convince her. My daughter, I am dearly sorry for everything that has happened to you and your partner. You've grown into such a responsible and strong lady, and I'm so proud of you for all you've done. This predicament more than meets the qualifications of using what you seek. Therefore, I will take you to it and teach you how to use it. Thank you, Mother. Ganyu thanked, happy that her mother had not changed at all after so many years. Rajora got to her feet and stated one thing before taking off to fetch the treasure Ganyu needed to gain an advantage in her current reality. After you two finish your cups, I'll guide you to the greatest treasure of the Qilin race. If I may ask, what exactly is this thing? Keqing cut in, her curiosity burning to know the identity of this ancient relic. Ganyu and Rajora's gazes met instantly, her beloved nodding her head as if to confirm something important. Ganyu's mother nodded back, turning to Keqing to confirm whatever she and her daughter had agreed to. The Talisman of Ascension, Rajora confirmed. The only thing that can unlock a Qilin's true potential. A delicate process that can be dangerous if the host is not ready. But I believe, given what I've heard, Ganyu is ready to ascend past her current potential. Keqing nodded her head in agreement. Then she and her beloved were left to finish their cups. It was a quiet 5 minutes of slowly sipping down the unique brew, both of them knowing what came next would be a challenge that only Ganyu could conquer with her strength and will as a Qilin. Rajora had led the two lovers back to the ruins of the once Qilin society, standing before the littered remains of the past and awaiting further instruction from their guide. It was clear that she was reminiscing about the times when her fellow brothers and sisters were still alive and wandering the village without any worry, times she wished she could have back, but knew that was impossible. Mom, are you okay? Ganyu asked worriedly. Yes, dear. Nothing more than a lady enjoying what once was the great pastime of the Qilin race. Rajora responded, her voice carrying a hint of emotion. Forgive me. The relic is under these ruins where the main Elder Temple used to be. They were the ones who guarded it until a Qilin turns the proper age for the process. Allow me to change form real fast so I can have the proper strength to lift this clutter. Ganyu shook her head instantly, knowing her mother was not in good enough health to transform. No, Mother. You're not in the right health to do that. I'll change and do the job. Okay? Rajora felt emotion ping her heart, but knew very well that her daughter was absolutely right. Therefore, she swallowed her pride and allowed her child to take her position. Very well, sweetheart. She agreed. Just be very gentle. You don't want to accidentally break the entrance where the talisman is being held. Got it. Ganyu assured, then, with careful focus, began to change into her Adeptus form. Just like in Inazuma, she grew the height of a monolith and became covered in icy blue fur that was as thick as a lion's mane. Rajora was quite impressed at her daughter's form, having not seen her that way ever since Ganyu was just a toddler. She was so proud that she smiled brightly, her daughter beginning to move aside all of the resting ruin of the Peaks of Serenity. As promised, Ganyu was very delicate with the litter, shuffling it aside with care, up until nothing but the ground was visible. That'll do, sweetie, Majora commanded. I can handle the rest. Ganyu nodded her colossal head and quickly reverted back to her regular self. Rajora had already limped her way over to the target spot, having stopped to look it over. Ristala Remoratiso! She exclaimed in a very foreign language that the lovers could only guess as some ancient Adeptus language. She tapped her cane against the ground, and in a sudden burst of light, a new entrance had come into being, opening wide to where it could be accessed. Ganyu and Keqing met up with Rajora, only to find what looked like a gaping maw with a staircase just visible in the light of the area. Using some kind of Qilin art, her horns began to glow, confirming they were about to engage deeper below the current ground level. Stay close to me, Rajora stated, walking onto the staircase and leading her two attendees down. Ganyu and Keqing followed closely, eventually falling into nothing but a sea of black, the lighting of Rajora's horns being the only thing guiding them the right way. It seemed like they'd been walking for at least 20 minutes, up until Rajora stopped dead. She tapped her cane's base on the ground again, immediately causing something to happen that neither of the two lovers had expected. A path that illuminated a blue glow as if it were a guide leading them to their preferred destination. Rajora confirmed that theory true upon her next statement. The elders devised a path that could only be accessed by a Qilin to assure safety for the talisman. This entire underground is a massive labyrinth, so please, remain on the lit pathway, or this place might just end up being your tomb. Ganyu and Keqing nodded in agreement, continuing further into the underground labyrinth and being sure to tread carefully. It took a long 30 minutes to reach the end of the path, having come to a door with 3 specific patterns across it that resembled the seals Ganyu had broken to reach the Peaks of Serenity. We may have a problem, dears, Rajora stated, putting a hand to her face in slight stupidity. I forgot that there were 3 elders for a reason. This door must be opened by 3 Qilin all at once, and unfortunately, there's only 2 here at the moment. They truly knew how to secure something that they knew that, if it ended up in the wrong hands, could cause the end of the world. Ganyu wasn't ready to give up, seeing she'd come this far and wasn't going to let a clever form of security stop her. She put a hand to her chin, hoping to find a solution, but Keqing beat her to the punch. Wait, I think I might have a solution that might just be crazy enough to work. Rajora's eyes bulged in curiosity, open to anything that might progress their current predicament, so she just agreed. What's your plan? Well, it's definitely a long shot, but I thought back to something Ganyu said earlier, and it just might be the solution. She stated that because I'm her lover and we share a strong bond, I'm family to the Qilin race in her eyes. Therefore, even though I'm not one of blood, maybe if Ganyu and I hold hands or something, it can fool the door? Rajora expressed a look of doubt, but given nobody had any better ideas, she was up for it. Not going to lie, sweetie. That's quite a foolish suggestion, but also very clever. Let's try it. Keqing smiled and nodded, to which Ganyu took her hand tight and positioned herself in front of the far right seal. Keqing took the middle seal, and Rajora manned the far left, all three placing their hands on their respective seal. When you're ready, I'll start the process of breaking the seals. Rajora instructed. Got it. But what should I do to break mine? Keqing questioned, to which Ganyu answered quickly. Just think of the memories you've had with me. Our bond is the key, and the more you think of our memories together, the more energy is exhumed. Keqing nodded with a smile, confident that she could do it. Right. Thanks, Ganyu. Ganyu just bowed her head as an answer, to which Rajora took action of preparing for the process of breaking the seal. On the count of 3. Keqing took that as her cue to begin the reminiscing, so she closed her eyes and went into a deep trance to remember all of her recent memories with her beloved. 1, 2, 3. Keqing worked quickly, immediately finding the first most precious memory of Ganyu she treasured. The night they finally confessed to one another and made love together. She envisioned the feeling of her beloved pleasuring and exploring her with absolute curiosity and bliss, up until her body succumbed to it all. That was a night she'd never forget, and the next one was just as prominent. The scream that had awoken her out of a short sleep. The moment that had strengthened their bond as lovers. That was the night her beloved had shared her most tragic and personal memory, a sign of absolute trust and true love. Next came when Ganyu had served her dinner in Sumeru, followed by their first bath together, their night on the bow of the Yaokor, and lastly, the moment where it all began. The day of Keqing's initiation as the Yuheng, and when she saw Ganyu for the very first time. She had been standing with her back to her outside of Yujing Terrace, a sunset having adorned her as a background and caused her to stand out. While she hadn't known it yet, that had been the moment her spark for Ganyu had been lit in her heart, especially when she had turned to face her for the first time and she had seen Ganyu's beautiful eyes. At that time, she couldn't even say a word because she was awestruck by the woman she'd laid eyes on. She had no idea how Ganyu had taken her likely awkward as hell stare, but it didn't matter now, because they were together and loved each other dearly. Ganyu, come here and introduce yourself to our newest staff member, Ningguang had said. You two will be working together a lot, so it's best you two get to know one another well. That's when Ganyu had turned and Keqing had been love-struck silly. Oh, coming, Lady Ningguang, Ganyu had said, and had hurried to meet her new co-worker. Hello there. My name is Ganyu. I'm the head secretary for Yujing Terrace. It's a pleasure to meet you. And Keqing had just stood still, probably making Ganyu heavily uncomfortable, up until Ningguang had knocked her out of Cupid's influence on her senses. Lady Keqing, aren't you going to say anything? She had jumped back to reality, having cleared her throat to regain her composure. My apologies, Lady Ganyu. The sunset is just, quite appalling, that I lost focus for a second. My name is Keqing, and I'll be working alongside you as Yuheng. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. After her bumbling, all Ganyu had done was bow respectfully as a response. It had been a very awkward start to a growing bond, but after a few times working out in the field, she and Ganyu had grown close as colleagues. She was so deep in her memories that she hadn't even realized that once she had opened her eyes, they were radiating a glow as bright as the sun. Not only that, her plan had succeeded, and the seals had all been broken. She was flabbergasted. She'd managed to, through probably the most absurd plan she'd ever devised, surpass ancient magic older than her entire family. There was no doubt that she was the former Yuheng, seeing only someone like that could make something so comical actually work. I can't believe that actually worked, she stated as a way to congratulate herself. Nor can I. Huh. It seems my daughter sure has something truly special. More than you can ever imagine. Ganyu chimed confidently. Keqing blushed at the compliment, rubbing the back of her neck shyly. Bajora broke the flood of graces by re-establishing why they were there in the first place. Alright, now comes the most dangerous part. The ascension itself. Across the room in front of them was 3 things. Closest was a stone pedestal that housed one thing that resembled an oversized Mora. Then, on the far side, was a golden statue of a Qilin that had a provided seat in the center between its 2 front legs. Last was hieroglyphs that told a story of an ancient past that was plastered on all 3 of the walls, most likely something in relation to what was about to occur. I'll only ask one more time, Ganyu. Are you sure you want to do this? Because once the process starts, there's no going back. Yes, I must do this for the safety of Teyvat's people. Very well. Then please take the talisman and stick it into the slot in the middle of the statue's forehead. From there, you will seat yourself in the middle section of it and await the Qilin god to connect with your psyche. You will be on your own from there. So good luck, and do your best to earn the knowledge of the talisman. Whenever you are ready, sweetheart. Ganyu nodded her head and walked forward to the pedestal supporting the talisman. After taking a long breath, she took the talisman from its resting spot and placed it in the slot positioned on the statue's forehead. Once the relic was in place, Ganyu took another deep breath to calm her nerves, then sat herself in the provided throne, awaiting whatever was to come next. At first, there was nothing but silence, up until Ganyu suddenly felt a surge of ancient power attack her senses. A sensation that overwhelmed her instantly and knocked her unconscious. The trial of the talisman had officially begun. Ganyu opened her eyes to nothing but a desolate plain blanketed by a transparent mist, the only sounds grazing her ears being the sound of her own breathing and heartbeat. She took a second to just look around, a slight bit of fear slithering down her spine at the scenery before her eyes. She knew this place. However, she didn't know why it felt so familiar to her, just knew that she'd been here before. Had it been in a dream or nightmare that she'd found herself in this mysterious landscape? Or was it familiar to her from a memory she'd buried in the back of her mind to never resurface and fester again? The more she stared at the blank and ambient surroundings all around her, the more things started to become more clear. Then, in a sudden moment, Ganyu came to full realization of where she actually was, causing her to jump mildly. This is where everything started. I'm in my mother's womb, she confirmed. The reason it's familiar and not at the same time is because most offspring don't have any recollection of their days as a growing being. Yet, I'm here, and it looks like this? Is this some sort of hint to something that has yet to occur in my life? Or do offspring simply manifest their own internal place of comfort prior to birth? Following her analogy, a light suddenly shone through the mist straight out from her, to which she knew was where she needed to go next. Not questioning anything, Ganyu followed the light, eventually coming to the next step of whatever test she was being given. However, upon meeting the next destination, she found herself in a very strange position. She was on all fours, and the world towered above her as if she were no bigger than a mouse. Her surroundings were that of the peaks of Serenity, but it was lively with hundreds of other Qilin of all ages. She was back in the past, back when she was nothing more than a naive child that didn't know anything about the world yet. A scent caught her attention almost instantly that made her lick her chops. The scent of the firefly berries she adored as a young child. Then she turned her head and saw that she was centimeters from a firefly berry bush and was smothered in the juices of said delight after eating them with gluttonous glee. She knew this memory. This was when she had snuck out to gorge herself with the berries and had... Ganyu! A familiar motherly voice interrupted her feast. The voice of her mother. A set of footsteps drew close to her, Rizhora having caught her stuffing her face with the sweet fruits. Oh no, Ganyu, Rizhora said, a slight giggle adorning her voice. Sweetheart, look at you. You're all messy. Ganyu couldn't speak for her young self, the answer to the clearly stressed and worried Rizhora being only a giggle. It is quite funny, isn't it? Rizhora stated with another giggle. Oh, who am I kidding? I can't get angry at you. However, that fruit isn't something that you should eat so much of, Ganyu. It'll make you all chubby and make it hard for you to walk. Young Ganyu just gave her mother a curious gaze, somewhat understanding what her guardian was saying. All right, my child. Let's get you back home and work on getting you all cleaned up. Your father is worried sick about you. She pouted as a message of letting her mom know that she was sorry. Ganyu was impressed at how intelligent she was at such an age, enjoying the memory that she had adored from the day it had occurred. Out of her nostalgic thoughts, the same light from before burst through the world around her as if some force able to bend the laws of the world had punched a hole through reality. Once again, Ganyu just followed it, knowing she needed to keep going to finish the trial. Through the second portal of blinding light came another memory she recognized immediately. It had occurred a few years after the last memory, and was the practical rehab that had broken her unhealthy addiction to the berries. Mommy, is this really necessary? Young Ganyu had spoken, staring at the monolith of a mountain that was Mount Hulao. My dear, I've warned you about eating too many of those berries, and you decided not to heed. Rizhora replied. Therefore, I must punish you in a way that'll actually make you listen to me. So, this mountain will be your punishment. We're going to get rid of that chubby belly by walking from the bottom of it to the very top peak and back down for an entire week. Your grandmother and I used to take this trail and do the same thing every day, and it broke my habit with those berries as well. So, I will do the same with you to make sure you never touch those things again, unless you are instructed to. Young Ganyu pouted, but strangely didn't object to her mother's words. Again, Ganyu was surprised by just how mature she had been at such a young age. Come along, Ganyu, Rizhora directed. We've got a long day ahead of us and need to get started if we want to be back by dinner time. Following that, mother and daughter began the long and egregious ascension up Mount Hulao, having stopped to rest only 2 times before they had reached the highest point of the colossal mass. At the top, Ganyu and Majora had stopped to take in the sights of the view, Ganyu feeling as if she were above the heavens.
It's so pretty up here. Look at the clouds, Mommy. It's like we're above the sky.
Majora merely smiled at her daughter's exclamations, having responded exactly the same way when she saw that breathtaking view for the first time as well.
Yes, it is beautiful up here,
Majora replied.
A perfect place for us to stop and rest for a while.
She offered her daughter a seat under one of the trees, pulling out a basket and offering Ganyu one of the servings she'd prepared as a reward for her making it to the top.
Are those Vasca leaves?
Ganyu questioned.
Mm-hmm.
A reward for our efforts, Majora confirmed, handing her child her portion, to which Ganyu accepted.
Eat it slowly, or I'll take it away. We need to get that appetite of yours under control as well. Okay, Mommy.
Ganyu agreed.
I'm sorry that I eat so much food.
Majora patted her daughter lightly on the head, assuring her that it wasn't entirely her fault.
Ganyu, sweetheart. You don't need to be sorry,
Majora assured.
Qilin naturally have rigorous appetites when they are still young, so it's not really something I can blame you for. It's an adult Qilin's responsibility to stop the natural bad habits of our offspring. Hence why we're here on Mount Hulao enjoying a snack and admiring the gorgeous sights nature offers to those willing to reach the peak. Isn't this high carb for you too, though?
The young half-Qilin questioned.
Of course. But it's my duty as your mother to do what's right for you, even if it's hard on me to do so. It's something you'll have to do someday as well, Ganyu. One day, you'll have your own children and will have to guide them just as I am now. Only then will you understand why, while this punishment may seem harsh, it's for your own good. Okay, Mommy. I promise to be the best mommy ever. I want to be just like you when I'm older.
Majora chuckled at her daughter's words, happy that she'd left a positive impression on Ganyu's view of her future aspirations. However, that wouldn't be for a long time in her daughter's life, likely centuries upon centuries from now.
I'm glad to hear that, sweetie. Now, let's eat these Vasca leaves. We still have to make the hike back down and home to your father.
Young Ganyu nodded her head with a giggle, following up with taking slow and easy bites of her earned reward. The memory ended there, and the same mysterious light tore through the void. However, before moving forward, Ganyu stopped to ponder about all she had seen up to then. What did they all imply that was connected to her current trial?
Let's see. The first memory was related to growth and mystery. The second was implied with happiness and naivety. And this one contained the one thing that everyone aims for in life. The responsibility of guiding their young to assure success in their future. Now, let's connect those factors to my current self.
Ganyu pondered deeply for a minute, trying to connect the dots. Eventually, it suddenly clicked and caused a sense of fear to wash over her at the possibility of what might be next.
By connecting these key points to my current self, the answer is simply that one's fate isn't sealed in stone. I did achieve success, but not in the way my mom had set me up to accomplish. I lost everything, was taken in and raised by Cloud Retainer, faced even more loss and trauma, and even now, I don't have the same aspirations that I had back then. I don't wish to have any children right now, nor has that thought ever crossed my mind after I lost my original home to those thugs. To put it simply, these memories are setting a basis for what my life would have been if it had gone undisturbed, which means that what is about to come next is when my destiny was altered by the course of fate.
Ganyu gripped her heart at the sudden realization that she knew what was beyond the light shimmering before her. She was about to relive the memories that she dreaded the most, and that immediately caused her to stop and possibly consider quitting the trial. However, she knew she couldn't, and that this was all part of the test. Life wasn't just full of childhood innocence and aspirations set in stone. No, that was the basic script written by the hand of destiny that everyone wished was all there was to a lifetime. However, life had another cruel force that defined the course of wishes and dreams. This had been the test of destiny. Next was the test of fate. Ganyu took a deep breath to prepare herself for the next obstacle course in this mental trial. Then, with as much bravery and strength as she could display, stepped forward through the lighted gateway. Upon meeting the other side, she was greeted with exactly what she'd expected. Her home was raided by thugs. Every inch of it was ablaze in flames, and the Qilin were in a battle to defend their children. Ganyu was beside Rajora, crying in fear of what was happening, and gripping her morphed mother's front right leg as tight as possible. It was chaos, and just as vivid as Ganyu remembered it back then. Her father was guarding her and Rajora from the attacks, slowly starting to succumb to his wounds. She wanted to fight back, wanted to alter the course that fate had paved for her. But just like before, Ganyu was just a child seeking comfort and safety from the madness. There was nothing she could do to alter what was happening again in front of her, and could only relive the pain and sorrow currently swarming her entire being. Rajora! I can't hold up much longer, spoke Ganyu's father. Please, run and take care of Ganyu. I'm not leaving you to die, Vitoris. We can't abandon our home. Where will we go? Rajora, if you stay here, we'll all die, he countered. Please, do what is best for both of you. He lost track of his words, the blood loss being the cause. There was little time left, and even if she tried to run, Rajora knew that she was likely to be injured. That led to her making the decision that changed Ganyu's life forever. Ganyu, listen to me. I need you to run from here. Run until you can't run anymore. Mommy will come find you after this is all over. No, I can't. The Qilin quivering at her hoof desperately pleaded. I want to stay. I want to be with you and Daddy. Sweetheart, you need to leave. I promise that I'll find you and bring you back. It's not safe for you now, so please, let go. I can't. I'm scared, Mommy. Then Rajora did what she needed to do to assure her daughter's safety and future. With enough force to avoid hurting her, Rajora pried her child from her leg and tossed her far enough from her to send a clear message that she was serious. Ganyu had landed with a little yelp, but upon meeting her mother's gaze, she knew that she needed to listen. Run. Run until she couldn't move her legs anymore. Go, Ganyu! Rajora demanded, and after finally realizing her mother wasn't playing, Ganyu turned and began to run as fast as she could. Once her young self was out of sight, as if fate had been taunting her, Vitoris fell onto the ground, leaving Rajora to defend herself. However, something strange happened instead, the thugs turning their focus away from Rajora and looking in the direction she had run. That had set a fire ablaze in Rajora, having vowed to protect her daughter from the moment she gave birth to her. She worked quickly to stop the pursuit by jumping in their path and did all she could to fight back. Ganyu was no longer in any line of fire, so she had no restrictions as she tore the heads off of her enemies, crushed them with her hooves, and gave them the truest display of a mother's love for their child in the rawest form possible. A display that ended up with her as the victor at the cost of a few wounds and her child being lost out in the Liyue wilderness. She had wanted to run out and find Ganyu, but her injuries were far too great for her to even try so. Therefore, she did what was best for her and Ganyu, and allowed herself to rest and heal.
I'll come back for you, my little Ganyu. I promise.
It ended there, but Ganyu already knew what was next, so she took the plunge into the next memory upon the light piercing through the stage. Upon meeting the other side, she was met with another grim sight that she remembered so vividly that it stung her heart. The day she had discovered the corpse of Yunha. She stood at the gateway to a tattered and scorned land of debris that once housed hundreds of innocent people. A look of confusion was plastered on her face, but it quickly dwindled to one of absolute horror at the realization of what the state of the village implied.
No! No! Yunha!
Her young self shouted as she started to run into the village and look through the ruins. She lifted countless boards, shouted her friend's name hundreds of times, prayed that she wasn't too late. But all of her efforts and hopes descended to nothing upon lifting a large piece of debris and finding the motionless corpse of the friend she had accidentally made years ago. The adolescent couldn't speak or think at all and just fell to her knees in tears, staining the bloody clothing that adorned Yunha's body in absolute sorrow and disbelief. She collapsed onto her friend's husk and cried for hours, up until she exhausted herself and fell asleep. When she finally opened her eyes, her own clothes were stained with Yunha's crimson life supply, and she's as silent as a mouse scouring a house at night. In other words, her will and soul are broken, and all that remained was rage. The adolescent rose to her feet and started looking around for a specific thing, finding what she needed quickly. The remains of a broken arrow that had clarified who had attacked and murdered her best friend.
I won't let your death be pointless, Yunha. These bastards are going to pay the price.
From there, the memory shifted to Ganyu taking pursuit on her targets, having found them not too far from the village. Rage engulfed her young self like a volcano on the verge of erupting as she approached and readied herself to exact all hell on those in her crosshairs.
Who is the one that killed her?
She demanded. The thugs all jumped at the sudden intrusion, thinking that she had been an unfortunate damsel that could be easily subdued. Well, well. And what do we have here? Spoke the member that was likely the leader. A little lamb that's been separated from her herd? Or a harlot looking for some action? The group chuckled at the mocking, but Ganyu wasn't even fazed, gripping her bow as tightly as possible. Ah, I see. You're one of those quiet types. The leader continued to mock. Well, unless you've got something to say, I suggest you get lost, little girl. Ganyu hadn't even shifted, anger leading her to the next action that was sure to show that she wasn't playing around.
I won't ask again,
she demanded, having drawn up her bow and arrow and aimed it straight at the center point of the leader's forehead.
Which of you killed the little girl with short black hair?
Now the group of thugs were in a state of defense, having jumped in surprise at their easy prey taking the offensive.
Who the hell do you think you are, princess?
The leader exclaimed. "Do you even know who we are? We're the Xiaomei clan, and we don't care about anything but the sweet sensation of collecting the rarest treasures this world has to offer. We don't back down from anything, not even prissy little spitfires like you." The armed Ganyu was nearing the end of her patience, having grown tired of the thug treating her as if she were no more than a bug to a human. Therefore, she had given him a clear message that would prove that he had messed with the wrong person. "You're disgusting," she had stated coldly, having followed with releasing her arrow and inflicting her target with a shot to the shoulder. The monster had had no time to react, the sudden infliction of pain causing him to fall back to the ground. By the time it had taken him to recover, Ganyu already had had another shot prepared, having eyed her prey with pure rage and murderous intent. "You dumb bitch! Kill her!" he commanded, having directed his cohorts to her with the intention to end her life. However, Ganyu had seen that move coming and was prepared. She started to fire arrows at a rapid speed, each shot having hit and dropped every intended target. The thugs fell like flies, and their leader had come to full realization that this strange girl that had come to his camp in the dead of night was on the prowl for vengeance. Blood stained the ground, and the sounds of his fellow thieves were all that had filled the ambience of the night. He had tried to get up and run, but Ganyu had pinned him with more arrows. She had pierced his spine and severed his spinal cord, having made him nothing more than a useless bag of bones anymore. With all of his men dead, the thug had been met with his worst nightmare in the faint light that the campfire provided to his current position. He was done for, and upon the sight of his predator's approach, he had begged for mercy. "Please, I'm sorry for what I did. I'll give you anything you want if you spare me. I swear." Ganyu hadn't even been fazed by his pleas, having kneeled down to give him the last sight of anything he'd ever see. "Shut your damn mouth," she demanded. "You took my friend's life without any remorse or guilt. So why should I spare you of what you deserve?" He had no answer, only fear and terror. He had no way out of this. "That little girl pleaded for your mercy in her last moments. She begged you for her life to not be taken, so you have no right to beg for mine. All you have the right for is for me to give you exactly what you gave her before you killed her." Nothing had come from the killer's mouth, only sweat from his pores and tears from his eyes. Ganyu had him beyond scared straight, and had been too petrified at her presence to have even muttered a single word. Ganyu had had enough of playing with her prey, moving to finish her vengeance for Yunha in the best way she felt necessary. She had picked him up from the ground and dragged him back to the outer edge of the campfire. She stopped to perform one last thing before finishing her work, forcing his gaze to meet hers as a grim farewell. "Remember me, and remember me well as the one who gave you what you earned. Never forget my face as you burn to nothing but ash into the pits of hell." She finished her exclamation by tossing him into the flames, having listened with pure justice as the fire began to embrace and burn his flesh to charred ash. At first, his screams had made her feel satisfied and relieved, but those emotions quickly shifted to a feeling of distress and guilt. Her work had already done her prey in by the time the reality of what she had done had hit her like the impact of an atomic bomb. She had killed someone. She was no better than the very thugs that had coldly taken Yunha's life. She was a murderer, and it was far too late to undo the damage she had done. She felt sick to her stomach, falling to her knees and beginning to cry at the horrid realization of what she had just done out of the sole purpose of vengeance and anger. This wasn't who she was, but her hands were stained with the blood of the lifeless bodies surrounding her, her arrows having taken their lives. It was painful for Ganyu to relive this moment of regret in her life, having clenched her chest in pain at the fact that this was something that she had done. She couldn't deny or run away from it, only accept that she had taken all of those lives that night. Then the scene changed, a tall and clearly unique individual having walked up to her. Ganyu knew exactly who he was, and just how vital this very moment in her life had been to become who she was now. "Dear child of mine, why are you crying?" they asked. Young Ganyu had jumped at the sudden intrusion, having expected this to be the punishment for what she had committed.
Please, I only wanted to do what I thought was right.
She begged desperately.
Please, don't sentence me to damnation. I'm truly sorry for what I did.
"Young one, I am no deliverer of damnation," the stranger clarified. "The case of vengeance is always the most difficult to discern as a proper reason to take one's life. And while what you did was rightfully earned on his end, it also wasn't the proper way to exact vengeance. However, what I know prevents you from damnation is the fact that you have shown regret in doing so, something that he and his gang didn't show in their actions of savagery." The words touched Ganyu in a way that gave her relief, having turned her gaze to her new company to see them properly. She still sniffled and wiped tears from her eyes, having tried her best to get a hold of herself. However, the stranger had beat her to the punch. "I've seen you and who you really are, Ganyu, and know very well that you are not someone who would kill without reason. Your soul is gentle and kind, but every being in this world has a dark side to them that they sometimes lose control of. It is a part of living, and you lost control over yourself because you are simply part human." Ganyu was dumbfounded. He knew her name and the truth about her identity of being only half human, something she had never told anyone besides her adoptive mother.
I'm sorry, sir, but how do you know me so well?
She questioned. The figure reached out a hand to help her up from the ground, to which Ganyu hesitated to accept, but eventually took it. On her feet, she just eyed the man with curiosity and slight fear, his eyes glowing like golden embers from underneath the hood that adorned his head. "Because I know all of my children, Ganyu," he answered. "You were born in the Peaks of Serenity and are the result of your mother, Rizhora, engaging with a human man out of non-consensual means. I've watched you grow and train with Cloud Retainer on Mount Archons, and know that you've endured a great amount of tragedy and loss in your life. I also know that you are currently in a state of confusion in your life of who you really think you are, and I can assure you that there's nothing abnormal about that. You are unique, and uniqueness comes with conflict and debation of one's identity. However, I can assure you that you are far from a cold-blooded killer, and that your friend holds nothing against you for what you did. She'd still want to be your friend, and look at you as the same person if she were here with us." A calmness blanketed Ganyu's soul, having felt not so guilty about her bloody act anymore. This person made her feel less anxious or hesitant about the things she had questioned in the past, specifically her identity as a half-adeptus. However, she couldn't find it in her heart to forgive herself for her actions, seeing she had killed all of those thugs. She had no excuses.
I appreciate your sympathy and advice, sir, but I won't lie to myself that what I've done to avenge Yunha wasn't an act of savagery with unnecessary choices made.
She confessed.
I must live with what I've done as a reminder to never allow myself to go that far again, and hope that I can make up for it in some way throughout the remainder of my life.
The stranger nodded, surprising Ganyu that he actually was on the same page as her. You are a delicate one, Ganyu. They complimented. You are wise and mature for such a young age. And if that's the way you see as the only way to earn forgiveness from yourself, then you are already healing. In fact, I might have a way for you to find the answer you seek.
Huh? What do you mean?
Ganyu questioned. As I said before, I am not a deliverer of damnation, but I am a dealer of contracts. Therefore, I have an offer for you, Ganyu. A contract that will help you not only overcome your act tonight, but will also allow you to become more confident in who you truly are in this world. Ganyu hesitated at the offer. She was intrigued, but needed to know the full details of said contract before making any decisions she may not be able to take back.
What would I need to do?
She questioned. It's quite simple, but there's something you must know first. A war is approaching between the gods of this world. One that will likely take a long time to conclude and will lead to the deaths of thousands. I'm asking you to fight by my side and do all you possibly can to protect the people of Liyue. In return, your sins will be forgiven, and you will find peace with yourself when the time comes. Ganyu paused and thought hard about the proposition. It seemed like a fair deal, but the fact that thousands would die made her shiver. Could she handle losing another friend to war?
What you're asking of me may be something I cannot handle,
she explained.
One death led me to this. So what if I lost another friend on the battlefield?
The man nodded his head, solving the issue with the burning question of who he really was. As gentle as a Qilin's soul, so is their heart. Therefore, I'm willing to teach you things that you would need to survive in the years that this war will bring. They will leave scars and trauma, but in the end, I will guide you to the peace you seek. You'd have my word and full wisdom as the god of contracts. Ganyu's eyes bulged instantly. She knew full well who this proposer of deals was, and knew that everything he was saying would be fulfilled if she agreed. She didn't say anything for a long minute, only thinking over everything she'd been offered, up until she finally made her choice.
I will fight with you as the price of redemption for my sins, Rex Lapis.
The light pierced through again, but this time, Ganyu had no idea what would be next beyond the portal before her. The Archon War had brought many things in her time serving the Lord of Geo, so it could literally be anything. However, she could only go forward, so she did exactly that, preparing herself for the worst to come. Passing the blinding rays, Ganyu was met with something unexpected. A blank space that was only occupied by one lone thing. A massive Qilin that stood tall above her sat in patience as if it had been awaiting her arrival. And upon eyeing the beast more, Ganyu realized exactly who she was in the presence of. the spirit of the talisman that would be her judge in the trial. The sacred beast peeked its eyes open and stared down at her. Its irises radiated a golden glow, and Ganyu could feel them reading her over like a book as a prelude to judgment. Then, in a sudden moment, the monolith spoke. "Thou who has accepted the trial, please state your name." Its voice was like the tremors of an earthquake and the booming of thunder. She was intimidated, but knew that all she had to do was tell the truth.
My name is Ganyu. I am the daughter of Rijora and the adopted daughter of Vitoris of the Peaks of Serenity.
The beast didn't say anything at first, but after a moment of thought, it spoke again. "Ganyu of Rijora and Vitoris, you have accepted the trial of ascension and have now come to the final test. You have now faced both the test of destiny and fate, the tests that defy one's existence as a whole to earn the right to earn my blessing. This is the trial of recollection and acceptance, and shall you answer correctly based on what you've just witnessed, you will earn the right to ascend beyond your current self. Do you accept and agree to answer with the absolute truth?"
I do.
She answered. The creature nodded its head, commencing the final obstacle that Ganyu needed to conquer. "The trial will now begin, so please answer with only the truth. Otherwise, your soul will remain here in eternal limbo as punishment." Ganyu gulped at the clear warning as the creature started with the first question. "Ganyu of Rijora and Vitoris, you arrived here in a much unfamiliar place that you've never seen in your life. Could you please state exactly where the starting point of your journey was?" Ganyu decided not to jump the gun, taking a long moment to think over her original analysis. She'd guessed her starting point being related to her growth in her mother's womb, because all life starts as nothing but a seed being nourished to growth. However, there was one specific thing she looked over that she didn't specify, and that was the mist. Her mind spiked upon suddenly realizing what it actually meant, having been grateful that she'd taken time to think it over.
My starting point was the place all unborn life starts, at the crossroads of destiny and fate. All life starts as nothing more than an idea or thought adrift in a sea or mist of dreams, until one aspires to create life and nourish it within their own self. Life is first conceived by whoever controls fate and destiny, because we are all given a path to take in life prior to existence by the one who paves it.
An excellent answer. I'm impressed, young one. Ganyu wanted to celebrate her accomplishment, but knew she was far from done. Therefore, she kept a sharp focus on the task at hand, continuing to listen. Next question. In your test of destiny, you saw many memories that pertained to the innocence of childhood and growth. Can you explain why these specific memories were critical to the trial itself? Once again, Ganyu took a moment to ponder. However, she was pretty confident that her initial analysis was correct, so she gave her response.
Childhood is the time of our lives when we are the most ambitious and carefree, building the foundation that eventually leads us to following the path that was paved. It's critical to the trial because without a base to build hopes and dreams we hope to achieve, we can't tread the path at all.
The Qilin nodded its head again, confirming that she'd answered right. Very good. You are quite a perceptive subject, Ganyu of Rijora and Vitoris. However, these next questions will be harder for you to answer. Ganyu nodded her head, ready to take on the next challenge the beast had for her. Next question. In the test of fate, you encountered a great amount of your greatest demons and deepest memories. The first was a moment in your life where you had to leave what you knew and loved behind. So in doing so, what conclusion did you reach after witnessing it yet again? And how does it reflect as a positive outcome? That made Ganyu stop and go into deep thought, knowing she had to be careful with how she answered this. What conclusion had she met, and how had it affected her life in a positive way? That was a really good question, and she went over everything again just to make sure she didn't miss anything important. It took a long while, but Ganyu came to an answer that she felt fit the bill.
My conclusion is that I have no regrets. My mother did what she did so I could continue to walk my path of destiny and achieve my aspirations. Fate may have changed my course, but I still carry dreams that I hope to reach in life. So, while I had to lose my home and all I knew to continue down my path, in the end, it never changed me. That's why I am able to have hope in the darkest hours, and am able to continue to chase my dreams. Because I stayed on the road that was paved for me by fate and destiny regardless of my obstacles. I've lived happily without having any regrets or hatred for anything in my life, even if they were originally cruel and tragic in nature.
It went silent for a minute, causing sweat to seep from her pores in anxiety of the verdict. However, upon the mythical beast bowing its head subtly, Ganyu let out a long breath of relief that she had passed her current roadblock. Very well done. You recognize life as something that is precious, but also cruel at times. The path of life is treacherous and a double-edged sword. One day you can be living a normal and productive life. Then, in a flash, it can change completely. Your strength has no limits, Ganyu of Rajora and Photoris, showing that you are ready for the next question. Ganyu nodded confidently, ready for whatever this godly being would say next. She knew she was in the final stretch of the trial, but getting to the finish line was going to be a taxing feat to accomplish. Next question. In your test of fate, you were met with the memory of your greatest regret. Having grown and become more mature, do you still have any shred of regret for what you did that night? She had been correct. The questions were getting harder to answer and dealt with her own inner conflict that she still carried after hundreds of years. This was a personal question that she knew she couldn't lie about the answer to, and that was the point. This trial was a feat of confronting everything about herself, and she was now to the hardest parts that she questioned about herself. She took a deep breath and began to spill the truth.
I do. My lord made a deal with me that I hope to erase all of my regret for what I did that night. But in the end, I've come to realize that there's nothing in this world that can erase my sins. Doing so would be selfish and cold of me, and that's not who I am and never will be. I killed that man and his entire gang that night, and that's the truth. Nothing, not even the might of the gods, can erase what I've done. And I'll accept my punishment when the day comes that I am judged for my actions in life. If eternal damnation is the price I must pay, then I will endure it.
Silence followed, but the Qilin clearly showed that she had given the right response. It nodded its massive head and began to speak again. Accepting who you are and that what has been done cannot be undone is the greatest step of maturity. You have accepted your sins and the cost that may come in death, meaning you have cleansed your soul and will of any impurity. The creature paused for a moment, to which she assumed meant that the next question was the last one. This would be the hardest obstacle to pass, but she was ready to confront whatever came next, standing tall and proud before the gargantuan being that would declare her verdict. You have reached the last question of the trial, and this will be your determining factor if you are worthy of my blessing. So, as the last question, I ask you, Ganyu of Rizhora and Photoris, do you know who you truly are and your purpose in walking the pathway of destiny and fate? This question was definitely the hardest, seeing it dealt with her greatest insecurity about herself, her identity. Who was she to herself? That was a question that everyone has to eventually face, seeing if you don't know yourself, how can you grow into a better and confident person towards your goals and dreams? Ganyu paused to think hard, making sure to go over every aspect of the trial. She had accepted the truth about her greatest regrets, made it clear that fate couldn't alter her course to her destiny, and had spoken truths from the deepest corners of her psyche. She'd practically confessed every part of herself and life to the Qilin before her, all except for the one realization she had a hard time accepting. Was she a human or a Qilin? What was her true identity to herself? She gave her answer.
The truth is that I'm a human and a Qilin, and just like with my sins, it's something that no force can ever change. I'd always felt insecure around humans due to my past, but also didn't see that not all humans are judgmental. I realized that the day I met Yunhe, because she saw me as nothing but a friend and myself. The same goes for the day I encountered my beloved for the first time, because while her views were different from mine about the gods, she accepted me for who I was. It's thanks to the happiness and peace I had longed for that I no longer see myself as some kind of abnormality in this world. Yunhe befriended me for who I was, and Keqing loves me for who I am, both as a human and Qilin. And that makes me confident that it doesn't matter who I am. I will always be a hybrid creation between a human and Qilin, and I can accept that, because Yunhe, Keqing, and all of my comrades I fought with in the Archon War are the aspirations fate and destiny led me to. That was my destined path, and because I have made those dreams reality, that means that I have accepted everything about myself. Therefore, my answer is that I am simply Ganyu, the child of Rizhora and Photoris, friend of many humans, defender of Liyue, and lover of human Keqing.
Ganyu felt a warmth building up inside of her, something that she had wanted to feel for centuries. It was the result of her acceptance of her true identity in the world of Teyvat, and she had no second thoughts about it. She was herself, a Qilin, a human, a warrior, a lover. She was Ganyu, and only Ganyu. Nothing more, nothing less. The monolith before her nodded its head yet again, concluding the trial and confirming that Ganyu had earned its blessing. You have passed, Ganyu of Rizhora and Photoris. You have come to terms with yourself, your demons, and your past. Your soul is pure and clean, and your heart is golden and strong. You are ready to grow into a stronger and whole person. Ganyu smiled in relief, watching as the beast approached her and lied down. You will now receive the blessing of the talisman. Please bow your head, close your eyes, and think of the things that give you strength. They will guide the power to your soul and ascend you to greatness. Ganyu listened, lowering her head and closing her sight off to the world around her. She then began to reminisce about her life, but this time, nothing but memories that gave her happiness and internal peace. Her days as a gluttonous Qilin, the hike with her mother, her first encounter with Yunhe, the day she spent with her first human friend, the day she met Keqing, the time she was out on operations with her, the night she took her to dinner in Mondstadt, the evening she made supper for her beloved, their first time confessing their feelings and making love together, the bath before they left for Inazuma, fighting together to defend Inazuma, their reunion in the cathedral. They all built the warmth in her heart to a blazing inferno, causing her to smile. She finally had made peace with herself, and that was the best feeling to her. A sensation she hadn't realized had ended until she opened her eyes again, her mother and Keqing before her with curious expressions. She had passed the trial and was now powerful enough to stand against the Tsaritsa's forces. One of her tasks that she had needed to accomplish to save the world alongside her beloved.
Ganyu?
Keqing questioned with a hint of worry. To relieve her partner of any potential fears, she stood up from the statue's throne and addressed her love.
I'm okay, my love. I passed the trial and now have achieved what I came here to do.
It's not that, but your horns. They've grown.
Huh?
Ganyu gasped, reaching to the top of her head and finding that her horns had indeed grown longer. However, she didn't panic, assuming it as part of the blessing she'd received.
It's probably just a part of the ascension process. Nothing to be scared of.
Keqing smiled in relief, addressing something else that caught Ganyu by surprise.
I suppose that explains the eye color change too.
They're golden now. Again, Ganyu gasped, but wasn't worried about it being anything drastic.
Common results of the trial.
Rajora chimed in.
You have indeed ascended, sweetie. But tell me, do you feel any different? Honestly, not at all. However, while I don't feel different, I can feel that I am stronger. It's similar to that of a sixth sense.
Well, I think you look absolutely beautiful. Keqing complimented, causing Ganyu to blush.
My love, you're embarrassing me.
I just wanted to assure you that, while you have changed, you're still the same Ganyu to me. Ganyu smiled, relieved that her transformation hadn't affected Keqing's feelings for her.
I'm beyond happy that my daughter chose you as her partner.
Rajora stated.
You have my respect and trust, my beloved daughter-in-law.
I appreciate that. To be honest, I was surprised how open you were to us being lovers. Rajora shook her head at the thought that she'd be the one to judge their relationship.
I just want my Ganyu to be happy. And if you're the person that she is happy with, along with the fact that you clearly love and accept her for who she is, then I am willing to welcome you with open arms.
Keqing smiled and nodded her head.
Then I promise to be the best partner to your daughter as much as possible.
Rajora returned the sentiment, reverting back to the task at hand.
Now, while you now possess this power, you will need help to control it. I know how to do it, but it will likely take weeks for you to control. Given that you need this power to save our world, are you willing to stay here and take the time to master it?
Ganyu averted her gaze to Keqing, having already made her decision in her mind. As if they could read each other's minds, Keqing immediately caught onto the message her beloved was paging to her.
Stay. Me and the others will be fine. Not to mention that you two haven't seen each other in centuries. So please, take time to reminisce as mother and daughter.
Ganyu nodded with a warm smile, relieved that Keqing had caught her message. With the two lovers having agreed to what needed to be done, Rajora cut back in.
Thank you for understanding, dear. However, it has gotten quite late, so please, stay for tonight. You can venture out in the morning.
Keqing agreed with a bow of her head, following with the three departing the underground chamber and labyrinth. After that, they returned to Rajora's residence and took time to just talk and indulge in Qilin cuisine, a paradise that Ganyu had taken time to soak in before retiring for the night in her original home that she'd longed to find for what seemed like an eternity. Two weeks had passed in a flash, and in that time of training with Rajora, Ganyu had become much stronger and wiser about her new self. Her spiritual connection to the Qilin god that had granted her her new strength and abilities had grown much stronger, and now she could perform adeptal arts that would aid both herself and Keqing on the battlefield. However, they were still exhilarating to her body's energy, so she could only use these arts sparingly. Ganyu had had no problem with that, seeing she was more comfortable using her bow over godly magic, but still took the proper training to use her new skills effectively. They would surely come in handy when the time came to confront and end the Tsaritsa once and for all, but that day was yet to come, and their side of the battlefield currently had the advantage. Therefore, she didn't have to think about the day of Teyvat's fate for a while, and could take a moment to breathe and spend precious time with her beloved. Over the 2 weeks away from Keqing, Ganyu had longed to see and feel her beloved's arms around her, but her mother had managed to comfort her in her grief. The two had shared many great stories in their time back together as mother and daughter, having even taken the hike up Mount Hulao to rekindle old memories from a time long past. Ganyu still had a hard time believing that she'd somehow found her mother after thousands of years, feeling as if their reunion had been poetically foretold by whomever paved the paths of fate and destiny. But the truth was that she had found and would never abandon her again. That was a promise, up until the day her ancient heart stopped beating and she had fulfilled the contract she'd made with Morax all those centuries ago. However, while Rajora was a caring and gentle mother, she was much stern and strict as a mentor. It was because of that reason that Ganyu had achieved so much in little time, and that was something she could only thank her mother for. However, there was one thing she had requested her mother to do, seeing one of the features of her new form had become nothing more than a nuisance. That request had been to shorten the length of her horns, even if it would likely be an unpleasant process. The weight of her new appendages had made her balance waver like a stone sinking in a body of water, and that was nothing but a weakness to her in her eyes, so she had decided to bear the discomfort to assure her battle etiquette unhindered. Despite Rajora warning her that filing her horns back to their original length would be the equivalent of antagonizing every nerve in her body, she still went through with it. As expected, Ganyu had squirmed and squealed during the entire procedure, the filing tool feeling like her body was being consistently struck by lightning. However, she'd powered through the grueling 2 hours, and as a way to calm her frenzied nerves, had soaked herself in a nearby spring. The coolness of the water had acted as a soothing agent instantaneously upon descending her entire bare body beneath the surface. She hadn't known how long she had been within only the tranquil calm of the spring's body, only knew that when she had arisen back to reality, all of her nerves were calmed and docile. A huge relief that had washed over her like a wave, having spent the rest of her private time in the cool water reminiscing about the past and Keqing. Outside of training, Ganyu had fancied herself with new recipes her mother had shared with her, all of them being Qilin-based dishes that she had never recalled trying in her past. It was likely due to her childish sweet tooth that she'd never given much healthier dishes a try. At the moment she had tasted the delicacies, she'd giggled at her recollection of the times as a child when she'd refused to try anything without sweetness in its mixture of ingredients. Her mother had giggled along with her as well, finding the entire scenario nostalgic and cute. She'd seen and lived all those times all those centuries prior, and seeing her daughter realize now that she had only been doing what was best for her back then was a moment of accomplishment for her in the present. While Ganyu still had no interest in taking the role as a mother, nor could she produce one with Keqing as her partner, hearing stories about herself from her mother that she couldn't possibly remember as a toddler had given her consideration. However, that was in the air for now, seeing the fact that Teyvat was at war with the Tsaritsa was much more critical than anything else. Therefore, Ganyu had put her mind furthermore on her training, up until something else had occurred to make her act otherwise. Much like what had happened to Mona prior to Mondstadt's siege against the Tsaritsa's pawns, had happened to Ganyu, just not as serious or traumatizing. It had come from out of nowhere around the 13th night since her decision to remain in the Peaks of Serenity to train with her mother, and upon waking from it, Ganyu had known full well that the phenomenon she'd experienced wasn't something to ignore. Two weeks after Keqing's departure, Ganyu stood in a void of darkness with nothing but a mist cloaking the surface she currently stood upon. At first, she had no idea what to think, having only seen something as such when she took the trial to increase her strength as a half-Qilin. The current scenario grew even more mysterious upon her seeing no way out, along with the realization that it was abnormally cold in her current environment. However, she wasn't shivering or even felt chilly in the slightest, which made her even more curious and somewhat afraid. This phenomenon was unlike anything she'd experienced in her long life, and upon collecting her emotions and thoughts on her current predicament, she knew exactly why everything about this seemed paranormal. She was dreaming. How she knew she was, she couldn't perceive, but she couldn't decipher any other explanation. Another factor that she realized was that this dream wasn't something alike a regular one, but was something more unique. The fact that she was fully aware that she was asleep reminded her of when she had been in that trance for over a month. She'd known the entire time that she was unconscious in reality, and had gone through a whole journey of discovering more about herself, her past, and things she'd have to do in reality to become even stronger to stand against her enemies. An epiphany of self-discovery and trials that tested all of her strengths. This felt the exact same, but she knew it wasn't. However, what she could tell was that it was something of importance, and upon looking out from her, she saw something that she knew was critical to whatever she was exploring. After focusing more clearly on the figure, she knew exactly what she'd found, remembering the imagery of her form in Rezshov's recorded memories. Just 30 yards out from her was the monster known as the Tsaritsa. She could feel her rage and chaotic flurry of emotions bursting to the surface of her soul upon the sudden realization of her and all of Teyvat's enemy being straight out from her. However, upon a second glance, Ganyu froze in conflict, feeling as if the figure in the distance wasn't the same person as the cold-blooded goddess she knew of in reality. She seemed different, and carried a different atmosphere to her person. There was no doubt that it was the Cryo-Archon, but this version of said goddess seemed different in both stature and appearance. The Tsaritsa beyond the realm of her dreams appeared strong, independent, and intelligent. This mimic gave a sense of frailty and sorrow. Ganyu glanced at the doppelganger again, and upon a more proper examination, she noticed something abnormal. She was much younger than the cryo goddess and bare naked with nothing but her long snow-white hair covering her privates. She was also in a fetal position and cowering from some unknown force, to which Ganyu knew was enough proof that whoever was sharing this space with her couldn't be the same Tsaritsa she called her greatest enemy. However, that conclusion raised more questions than answers, and upon realizing that the cowering girl wasn't who she'd originally thought, A sound broke the cold and dense silence.
Do not worry. I mean no harm and will answer all of your questions willingly.
Her voice was a shallow whisper full of fear and truth. With her newly enhanced senses, Ganyu could tell full well that this young Tsaritsa copy wasn't trying to trick or lie to her, but she kept her guard up regardless.
Who are you, and why have you invaded my dreams?
She questioned with clear authority that she wasn't some naive peasant she could easily fool. The young mimic shifted slightly, signaling to Ganyu that her company had caught her message loud and clear. She spoke up again, addressing Ganyu's curiosity respectfully.
The answer to your first question has already been answered.
The girl answered, turning slowly to meet Ganyu face to face. Upon seeing her unannounced guest's face clearly, Ganyu felt her heart skip a beat. Down from her usually blue eyes, now clouded by a film of gray, were dried trails of tears. Her skin was cracked as if it were made of fragile glass, and where said glass had chipped away from her body were holes that radiated a fading light. She looked weak, and as if some unknown force were deteriorating her form entirely. Less to say, Ganyu was horrified and saddened at the sight before her. The girl didn't flinch, only continued to answer Ganyu's growing curiosity.
It's true. Your assumption of my identity is correct. However, I must also add that you are only half right, seeing, while I am the Tsaritsa, I am only a mere fragment of the version you are familiar with.
Ganyu could hardly speak, her emotions flooding her senses like a tsunami wave.
Morax above. What has happened to you?
The supposed Tsaritsa answered with merely a shift of her gaze to the fog-layered floor, following with an answer that sent chills down every nerve of Ganyu's body.
Too much for me to even remember.
Ganyu was sold, the entire situation getting all the more strange second by second, and she wanted to figure out exactly why this had come to be in the first place.
Before I explain why I am here, allow me to apologize. I would never wish to intrude anyone's psyche without consent, but I had no other choice. Allow me to explain, seeing you must be confused. I was given one opportunity that would likely never come again, so I had to take it to speak with you. To keep things simple, the form you are seeing me as right now is the true form of the lady you know as the Tsaritsa. The Tsaritsa you are familiar with is truly nothing more than a puppet that has been so ever since the day of her inauguration as the goddess of Cryo. Thousands of years ago, I was betrayed by someone I trusted, and the result of it is what you see before you. I lost control of my own self and was locked away in the darkest recesses of my mind, left to fade away to nothing but a deteriorated soul trapped in limbo for the rest of time. For centuries, my true form has slowly been in a cycle of being wringed dry of all of her power. But due to having more power than the usual archon, the process of eventually meeting peace has lasted for millennia. As you can see, damage has been made, but my end won't likely come for likely thousands of more years. It's happened so much that the pain has become mute, and I truly gave up on any chance of being saved. Up until an aberration in the cycle occurred that opened a window of hope.
She shifted her gaze back to Ganyu's own, causing Ganyu to wince in surprise. She had been too interested and fixated on listening to what was turning into a horrid truth to have even noticed that the frail being before her had turned her attention to her as a signal that the next part pertained to her. Ganyu just let her speak.
For millennia, the me you know remained unfazed by anything up until just recently. A crack opened in her that I'd never seen before. One that allowed me freedom from the chains I was bound to ever since that dreadful day. That crack was caused by a rift in her usually unmatched methods of strategy. In other words, you and your comrades I saw recorded within her memories caused her to finally be outmatched in the current war you are fighting in against her. Knowing that you and that other girl managed to break her, I knew it was my only chance to escape and tell the truth about what happened after the coronation of the current me. And what happened?
Ganyu said sorrowfully. The Tsaritsa sighed heavily before continuing, implicating that whoever had betrayed her had been close to her. She was hurt badly by this trusted friend or companion, and it was evident by the tone of her voice.
The controller of my puppet self is the person you know as number 2, or the doctor.
She confessed, to which Ganyu gasped, knowing who the doctor was very well.
He designed the crown for my coronation, but little did I know that once that very crown was placed upon my head, I'd be bound to an eternity of darkness and misery as a catalyst for another madman's goals for destruction and war. I'd been under surveillance of the doctor for thousands of years, up until you and your comrades managed to put a hole in his plans with no solution. This truth has been hidden away from history, all because as the Tsaritsa, I only wanted unity for my fellow brothers and sisters. I wanted to prevent catastrophes like the Archon War. Because I was a good-hearted Archon, I was silenced and used for the opposite.
Ganyu was shocked, and her heart ached for the fragment of the true Cryo-Archon before her. It was horrifying and absolutely disgusting what she'd been subjected to out of nothing but the sole desire to watch the world burn. She couldn't fathom what the true Tsaritsa had gone through over those thousands of years, all because she wanted to bring peace between the archons. Ganyu got on her knees and approached the goddess, noticing that she'd begun to cry. To show her sympathy and assurance that she believed everything she'd told her, Ganyu wiped away the tears of the archon with her right index finger. She was no more than a young god that had been betrayed cruelly by those she'd trusted, and Ganyu could feel her pain. All along, her enemy had been another victim, and now she could see exactly why the true remnant of the Tsaritsa's true self had come to her. It wasn't just to tell her the disturbing truth, but also to show her who the true enemy was. She knew what to do now.
I'm so sorry that you've had to suffer for so long, Your Majesty. While the Archon War wasn't prevented, and many of the original gods are now dead, your dreams for peace among the gods can still become reality. Please, tell me how my comrades and I can stop the doctor from accomplishing his goals.
It took a second for the Tsaritsa to answer, composing herself well enough to give a clear answer.
I appreciate your words, but even as frail as I am, I know my dreams are long gone. However, while my old dreams as the Tsaritsa are dead, my new dream of saving my brothers and sisters and the world we call home from extinction is very much within reach. Therefore, I will tell you everything I can to assure that the doctor is stopped.
She paused briefly to collect her thoughts clearly, knowing this would be her only chance to relate everything to Ganyu. After a long moment of thought, she finally gave Ganyu everything she'd need to hopefully end their war with the infamous Fatui Harbinger.
Defeating number 2 will be no easy feat, and to do it, you'll need more than just an army. The first thing you'll need is to break his ties with his other harbingers, and the only way to do that is to come after my doppelganger. He is currently under heavy guard of all of the Fatui Harbingers in the center point of the Zapolyarny Palace, minus number 2. Be aware that they are all completely unaware of the truth I have told you, so please do your best to convince them. If you can convince them, you can get to me, and from there, perhaps I can claim my life from that bastard who stole it. After that, all of the resources of the Tsaritsa and Fatui will be at your service to face the Doctor. Number 2 will use his clones to fool you, but the true version resides in the hidden laboratory located under Frostcap Island. Getting there will be a challenge, seeing he's prepared for any intruders by deploying fellow Fatui soldiers. As much as I wish I could save them from dying in vain, I cannot, nor do I believe they'd listen to reason. Your last challenge will be getting to the laboratory itself. The Doctor has laced the path with several traps and obstacles that won't be easy to traverse. Considering you've made it this far and are still alive, I believe you will take the proper precautions to make it there safely. As for number 2, I'm afraid I have no idea what awaits you if you reach him. He is very unpredictable and clever, so I highly doubt he'll just get on his knees and surrender. I understand,
Ganyu assured, placing her right hand on the center of her chest.
Whatever it takes, we will fight for your and Teyvat's freedom, no matter the cost. I believe you, and thank you for believing in me. However, I do have one request of you, shall things not go according to plan the day you infiltrate the palace.
A bitter taste filled Ganyu's mouth instantly, knowing what this request implied from her years in the Archon War.
What is it?
A pause followed, clarifying to Ganyu that her assumption was indeed correct.
If the opportunity to end the life of my reality self presents itself, do not hesitate to do it. If you kill me, the Doctor will have no control over the androids anymore, nor will he have access to a god's power.
Ganyu wanted to absolutely refuse, but she couldn't be selfish either. She couldn't deny a victim of thousands of years of torment their freedom. Otherwise, she'd be no better than the Doctor. Therefore, with a clenched fist and unadulterated conflict, she agreed to do so if the battle came down to having her do so.
All right, I promise.
The Tsaritsa smiled, despite knowing her request had caused much anxiety and hurt for her practical savior.
Thank you. I know I've put a heavy task on your shoulders, but please believe me when I say it's the best solution for the good of the world. It's my responsibility as an Archon of this world to see it survives the madness of the Doctor, and your duty as one who fights to protect it.
Ganyu nodded in agreement, knowing the goddess was right. The stage was set, and the target objectives were clear, so all that was left was to relay everything to her comrades back in reality. However, upon a sudden reminder of a critical factor to her whole situation in reality, Ganyu added an additional comment.
I'm sorry to ask you more in your weakened state, Your Majesty, but I must know. Are the Adepti and Rex Lapis still alive and well?
The Tsaritsa winced at the question, showing she had knowledge on the topic. She sighed heavily, following with an answer that brewed mixed emotions on Ganyu's end.
They are indeed alive, but much like myself, they have been forced into a docile state by the use of devices created by number 2. Therefore, I cannot say they are in a good state, seeing they have been drained of a great amount of their strength.
Ganyu felt her stomach churn, feeling sick from the cold and horrid truth of her fellow Adepti, guide in life, and adoptive mother. She needed to know where they were before their time eventually would run out.
Please, I need to know where they are. I must save them before they are killed by the doctor's cruel tactics.
The Tsaritsa nodded in agreement, but the change in expression on her face reflected nothing good, and that made Ganyu's blood turn to ice.
They are stored in the doctor's lab where the androids are being produced and modified. I'm very sorry that I can't give you a better answer, but that's where they are, and it's likely he'll use them against you. Therefore, you will have to be strong when it comes to you having to decide what is best for the world.
Ganyu clenched her fists in frustration, knowing that the Tsaritsa was likely correct. Could she watch the godly beings she grew up with be killed in order for her to save the world? The climax to this war was going to be harder than anything she'd ever experienced in the Archon War, but she held her right fist over her heart as a salute that she would do what was best for Teyvat, even if it cost her fellow Adepti's lives.
While it will be hard and devastating for me to handle, if it comes to that, I will do the right thing. I believe you. I can tell that you've been through many hardships, but also know you have a strong heart and will to protect those you love and care about.
A brief pause followed, allowing the heaviness of Ganyu's new objective to sink in and solidify in her mind. After the pause, the goddess concluded their meeting with a final statement.
Light has come from beyond this realm. Therefore, our time has run out. Now awaken and do what is right for the world.
She gently put her right hand on Ganyu's own left, ending the dream with words of confidence to her savior.
I will be waiting for you. Shall you succeed in your mission? Good luck, brave one.
Suddenly, a surge of ice-cold energy entered her, traversing her body like a slithering serpent all the way to her head. Then, upon the ice-laced snake touching her psyche in her dream self's head, a weightlessness took over her body, and in a flash, she opened her eyes back to reality. Sunlight blinded Ganyu's vision upon her wake, having remembered her dream and now clear objective detail for detail. She raised her head from her pillow and onto her feet, following with getting dressed and making her way to where her mother awaited her every morning. As expected, Rajora was seated and savoring herself with a fresh pot of herbal tea out in the courtyard, taking subtle sips in wait for her daughter's arrival. The sound of Ganyu's footsteps caught her attention instantaneously, having hearing as sharp as the tip of a sewing needle. She turned to the sight of her grown child, and upon one look of Ganyu's face, immediately knew something wasn't right. Being the mother she was, she approached her daughter with concern and addressed her clear worry.
Ganyu, is everything okay?
She asked. Ganyu wasn't surprised her mother had caught on faster than she could have even addressed it, never having been the best at cloaking her emotions from sight.
I'm fine, Mother,
she assured, following with a brief explanation of why she was actually troubled.
However, I'm sorry to say that I must leave today, seeing something major has come up in relevance to our war against Nesnaya.
Rajora raised an eyebrow, but she also could tell that Ganyu was being serious just by the tone of her voice.
Slow down, sweetie. What has happened to cause this sudden decision? Well, to put it in a simple way, I learned a horrid truth about who I thought was our enemy. A truth that has changed everything about this war.
Ganyu then followed by explaining her encounter with the true form of the Tsaritsa, making sure to include everything critical to the matter. At the end of it, Rajora was shaken and horrified to her core. She would have never thought such a vile and petrifying truth could exist, and she didn't even assume that it could have been a nightmare. Ganyu had told her of her epiphany prior to her arrival at the Peaks of Serenity, and from the way the encounter with the Tsaritsa had been described, Rajora didn't doubt that this phenomenon her daughter had witnessed was something of a similar nature.
There's no doubt in my mind that what you experienced wasn't just a nightmare. The Qilin who passed the trial gained stronger spiritual strength, and that strength pertains to archons as well. Therefore, I have full confidence that you did indeed speak with the true Tsaritsa, and believe that everything she told you is true. My heart yearns for the poor girl, God or not. So, you agree that it's best I leave to relay all of this to my comrades? Of course I do. While I would rather have you train a little longer, the fate of the world is more important than that.
Ganyu nodded with a smile.
Thank you, Mom. I promise that we won't be apart for long this time. I know, dear. I'm so proud of the strong and beautiful woman you've become, and always have been.
Ganyu smiled again, walking up to her mother and embracing her in a tight and warm hug. Rajora returned the gesture, and after a long minute of saying goodbye, Ganyu ran off to gather her belongings and started the long trip back to the gates of Mondstadt. The site of Dawn Winery came into Ganyu's view, having traveled miles upon miles to meet back up with one of her fellow comrades. Along the way back, she'd pondered on making this detour to fill Diluc in on the new course of action, seeing if they were going to infiltrate the Zeppelyarny Palace, Diluc would need to be aware. He had eyes in the Cryo capital right now, and was easily her and Keqing's best ally in terms of information on their enemy's status. With this new information, he'd have to alert his spies to obtain more critical information before they started the long trip to the borders of Snezhnaya. They had to be sure of any potential factors that could impact their plans, and that started with proper surveillance. Ganyu's nerves danced at the thought of the likely near future, seeing this mission would be the most important with no room for failure whatsoever. They'd have to be ready and willing to fight to their last breath against anything the doctor would throw at them, and that meant potentially losing allies she had come to care dearly about. However, she'd brushed away those thoughts, seeing that wasn't anything set in stone yet, so she instead focused on her objective at the moment. She walked up onto the foundation of the building and pushed open the doors that led to the inside of the winery. The inside was the same as always, the marble floor reverberating every step she took past the foyer and into the main room. She hadn't been surprised not to see Diluc or Keqing, both being busy bees in the current war against Snezhnaya. She was quickly noticed and approached by one of the main maids that worked to keep the building clean and maintained.
Welcome back, Miss Ganyu.
She greeted nicely.
Thank you. Are Keqing or Sir Diluc here at the moment? I'm afraid not. Both were alerted to Mondstadt early this morning and haven't been back since.
Ganyu felt a spark of curiosity flicker in her soul. The fact her company had used the word alerted had made her slightly anxious, seeing it seemed to imply that something of great importance or hazard had occurred.
Do you know exactly what they were called away for?
I don't, but I could tell by their demeanors and actions prior to leaving that it was indeed something important.
It's probably best that you head to Mondstadt as well, seeing I can also tell that you are here for something important.
Ganyu just nodded as an answer, too worried to explain anything about her encounter with the Tsaritsa.
I'll head there straight away. Thank you for your assistance.
No problem. It's what I'm here for. The maid finished. Then, with a smile, Ganyu turned and took her leave towards Mondstadt. Once she'd exited the building, she had shifted her pace into a run, enhancing her speed with the use of her new abilities. The journey from Dawn Winery to Mondstadt would usually take a long 30 minutes, but with her new speed, it only took 5. She met the bridge in no time and entered the city's inner borders to the sight of many men and women working on the buildings that had been demolished by the androids. It was a familiar view to her eyes, having been filled in on the siege by Keqing along their travel to the peaks of Serenity, and seen the civilians reconstructing their homes as she'd passed the gate during her last departure. It was a sign of hope and strength in a time of tragedy and grief, and that warmed Ganyu's heart. The people of Mondstadt are strong and carry an unlimited amount of hope, and that is what they needed in the midst of war. It was the only thing that could keep Teyvat from the brink of extinction, and as long as the people of it were willing to show no signs of surrender, Teyvat would remain alive and well. As she met the fountain between Good Hunter and the local marketplace, a local she hadn't expected to see approached her in very high spirits of her presence.
Miss Ganyu? What a coincidence!
The voice of Outrider Amber spoke amongst the ruined buildings. Upon turning her gaze towards the farthest wall past the fountain, she met the sight of the red-clad archer that adorned 2 practical bunny ears. She was wearing a bright smile and appeared to be setting off somewhere, her bow in her right fist evident enough to be an indication. Ganyu smiled as well, walking up to meet her fellow comrade.
It's good to see you again, Miss Amber. Where are you headed?
I was actually heading out to get you, seeing something major came up as of this morning.
I see. If I may, what exactly happened that caused such measures to be taken?
That's probably best said elsewhere. So please follow me to the Knights of Favonia's headquarters so we can discuss further with the others.
All right. Lead the way.
Amber obliged, turning back in the direction of the upper district of Mondstadt City. Along the way, all Ganyu could do was ponder about what had come up that's so important to cause such actions to be taken. Her curiosity burned for an answer, but rather than giving herself a headache, she just decided to be patient. She was at the intended destination in no more than a minute, having entered and worked her way into Jean's office with Amber's guidance. Upon entering, she was met with the sight of many familiar faces, but the first to catch her eye was her beloved's. Likewise, Keqing had met Ganyu's own eyes, and as a gesture of love and reunion, she had run up to Ganyu and wrapped her arms tightly around her. With no hesitation, Ganyu had returned the sentiment, allowing Keqing's warmth to embrace her body and radiate her happiness that they were together again after so long. While they didn't want to let go of one another, they knew the matter at hand was more important. Therefore, they released their hold from one another and allowed the others to speak. That was fast. Yelan stated, standing on the left side of the room with her arms crossed. Amber quickly followed with explaining why her trip had been cut much shorter than it usually would take. I just happened to meet her in the city as I was leaving. That's a blessing, seeing that saves us all a lot of time. I agree. Jean added, considering the matter at hand, it's best we not waste time and get it resolved quickly.
I apologize for being so impatient, but what has happened to cause this?
Ganyu jumped in, having grown too curious about the situation. Jean turned her gaze towards Diluc just off to her right side, to which Diluc answered with his own comment. Perhaps it's best if you just see for yourself, Miss Ganyu. He answered, following with him reaching into one of his inner coat pockets and pulling out a neatly folded up piece of paper. From the look of it, Ganyu assumed it to be a letter of some sort. She didn't hesitate and took it from Diluc, and upon unfolding the paper, Ganyu's eyes bulged instantly at the sight of it. At the top was the stamp of a snowflake as the emblem of the Zapolyarny Palace, things she was all too familiar with due to her original occupation as the head secretary of the Keqing. The paper in her grasp was an official document that had been forged by the Tsaritsa herself.
Dear government officials of Mondstadt, I forged this letter as a proposal of a truce between Snezhnaya and all fellow capitals beyond. I have come to an understanding that my forces cannot continue to collide with your own without the result of hundreds of losses, which has led me to the conclusion of cordially inviting those who are involved to Zapolyarny Palace to participate in the signing of a treaty to cease any further conflict between both parties. Your compensation for your losses in this war will be discussed in the action of our discussion of making peace. I will await your response before proceeding with any further actions on my part. Yours truly, Her Majesty, the Tsaritsa.
Ganyu wanted to rip the letter into millions of pieces, her blood boiling at the idea of just making peace with a witch that had taken everything from her in one night. She struggled to hold herself from destroying the document, stating her answer with her raw emotions clear as day.
Is she serious? After destroying mine, Yelan, and Keqing's home and lives, she thinks we'll just simply sign a paper and hold her hand in forgiveness? She can take this proposal and shove it. I refuse to just pretend that Liyue Harbor's destruction can just be easily forgotten with the signing of a treaty.
Good. Then we are all on the same page. Diluc added with a nod of his head. None of us are in agreement after all she's done, Miss Ganyu. A sudden warmth gripped Ganyu's left arm, causing her to jump in surprise. Upon eyeing the hand gripping her, she saw it was Keqing's, coming back to reality and calming down. She lowered her arms and took deep breaths, addressing her behavior after a good amount of time.
I'm sorry, everyone.
Don't be sorry, hun. Yelan answered. We all reacted exactly the same, and all of our anger is warranted, seeing that bitch has caused too much damage to just be forgiven with the signing of a paper. Ganyu nodded, still recovering from the emotions currently flooding her mind like a tsunami. Only after she'd managed to calm down did she realize why she had come there in the first place. She gasped, quickly addressing the true enemy they should be scolding.
No, you're wrong, Miss Yelan.
Ganyu answered, causing the entire room to jump in complete shock. However, upon her next words, it became clear to all why she had answered the way she had.
The Tsaritsa is not our enemy, but the harbinger known as the Doctor.
She then followed by explaining everything, every occupant becoming awestruck the further she explained. When she finished, not everyone had the same conclusion. To some, they speculated it as nothing more than a figment of her imagination, while others didn't deny her new abilities as a Qilin to decipher a dream from a reality. Even with enhanced abilities, what you saw could have easily just been a trick of the mind. Yelan stated, I do believe what you're saying, but we have to be certain if what you saw was reality or a creation of your psyche before we go storming into a battle we may not be able to win. I have to agree as well, seeing there is a chance it could have been fiction. Diluc added, like Miss Yelan, I do not think you are lying, Miss Ganyu. It's just best that we play our cards wisely rather than recklessly. Ganyu couldn't disagree, seeing their speculation was understandable. While she was pretty certain that what had happened was something real, there was a chance that she could also be wrong.
I understand. Is there any way to find out the real truth?
Ganyu questioned, turning her gaze to Mona specifically. If anybody in the room knew anything about dreams or visions, it would be her, seeing she experienced something very similar. Mona caught Ganyu's gaze and quickly acted on it.
Hey, while I had that one experience, I have no sort of experience with dream delving. Reading someone's fate or destiny is much more different than delving into their psyche. That is much more complex and dangerous. And I'm afraid a reading wouldn't do any good to determine reality from fiction either.
Ganyu nodded in understanding, returning to her thoughts and hopes for an answer to their current predicament. However, no such answer came, up until Yelan suddenly spoke up from out of nowhere.
I just thought of something, and I believe I may have a solution.
Ganyu was sold, curious on what her comrade had in mind.
What do you have in mind, Miss Yelan?
In my travels to the other nations, I met the Dendro Archon Lesser Lord Kusanali, and in the little time we spoke, I learned that she has abilities related to dreams. Perhaps she could assist in figuring out the truth. Ganyu believed her, knowing she had no reason to lie, and given it was an Archon, there was a heavy chance that she was right.
Then I suppose it's time to make another trip to Sumeru to get this figured out?
You took the words right out of my mouth. Considering we've made an alliance with Sumeru, this shouldn't be too much of a hassle. Then it's probably best that you get moving. Diluc added, if this actually turns out to be true, then we need to come up with a plan and unleash hell on the doctor as soon as possible.
Agreed. Well, girls, ready to head back to the jungle for a second time?
Keqing and Ganyu both nodded with a smile, Yelan walking over to their side of the room in preparation to depart.
Please, stay safe in your journey, and good luck to all of you,
Qin said as a goodbye.
Don't worry, we will,
Yelan answered. Then, with a turn of the doorknob, the three ladies started out of the Knights of Favonia's headquarters in pursuit for the sanctuary of Surasthana in Sumeru City.